All right, so we're on the second example of our video. We're looking at how do you write a conclusion, an ending to your narrative story. And we're going to look at specifically what did the character learn, okay? And in my story, I'm actually going to end up with some pretty strong feelings at the end, but at the end of my story, I could use learning. I did learn something. And because of that, I could write an alternate ending, a different ending to my story, because I did learn something very important. Okay? Now, could I include that something learned in my story? Absolutely. Just because I don't use it as an ending, I could use it someplace else. But I could use this additional ending as an ending instead. Now remember, I'm not going to cover every single type of ending in this video or in any of the other videos. I'll actually be covering those in some of my mini lessons that I give to you face to face. Okay, and again, some of those lessons, if you take a look at those could be like lessons learned. Tell me about the theme, the feelings of the character, maybe some questions that your main character or one of the other characters brings up about how everything was resolved. You know, maybe you want to talk about, compare the beginning and the end of your journey. Remind me about the beginning. Where did you start? And this is where you ended up. Your character ended up there. Those are some really great ways to end your story. Now again, you're going to get to write two different endings because I want you to really experience them. So you can pick one or the other. I want you to experiment with feelings and theme, or what did your character learn. You can, if you don't fit any of those, experiment with writer's choice, and that's the third one, but you don't have to fill that one in. I'm going to kind of leave that there as an alternative. But you and I will have to talk about that if that is something that is appropriate. All right, so what lesson did your character learn? In this story, remember, I broke my arms, okay? Ended up going to the hospital, and as I said in the previous video, one of my biggest fears was the fact that I was going to get into a whole heap of trouble because I had broken my arms, because I had been warned over and over and over again. Do not go swing on the swing set like you are. You're standing up, you're going way too high, you're going to break your arms, because I was a little bit reckless, if I had to be honest. And yes, those predictions came true, and I didn't like the fact that those predictions came true in any way, shape, or form, and I was embarrassed, and I thought that because I was proved wrong, I was going to get in a whole heap of trouble. So, with that, in the end, again, I have to have some sort of transition that I need to use to signal to the reader that my story is coming to a close. With my last one, I used all in all. With this one, I think I'm going to say, in conclusion. You could say in the end, also, if you don't want to say in conclusion. In conclusion, comma, as I sat there on the bench with my father, comma, he had his arm wrapped. I'm going to kind of move this out a little bit so you can maybe see what I'm doing. Wrapped around my shoulders. I knew in that moment, by his silence, okay, how do I want to say that? In conclusion, as I sat there on the bench with my father, he had his arm wrapped with, in conclusion, as I sat there with my father, with his arm wrapped around my shoulder, I knew in that moment, by his silence, I should not have feared being in trouble. As I sat and caught my breath, I realized that the punishment in the end was me breaking my arms, and living with that consequence. Dad yelling at me and spanking me would not punish me as much as the natural consequence of me being reckless and breaking my arms. Own arms. Sometimes I learned, sometimes you punish yourself. No one has to do it for you. All right, so in the end, in conclusion, as I sat there on the bench with my father, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, I knew that in that moment, by his silence, I should not have feared being in trouble. As I sat and caught my breath, I realized that the punishment in the end was me breaking my arms and living with the consequence. Dad yelling at me and spanking me would not punish me as much as the natural consequence of me being reckless and breaking my own arms. I learned sometimes you punish yourself. No one has to do it for you. So, there you go. There is my second transition, or my second ending. And those are the two that I really, really want you to focus on. As you are writing, you need to focus yourself on the two. You know, what did your character learn? Because I did learn something. And maybe what is the character feeling at the end of this journey? You know, it's important that you come to terms with some of that. Both of these I think would work beautifully as endings. And you can choose either one. We'll talk about how to pick your best. So, see you around, and I look forward to seeing you wrap up these stories. I mean, you have worked so hard on these. I'm just really happy with where you're at. Make sure that you continue working hard, because we are near the end, and the hard lifting, the edit and the revise, is coming up next. And that's usually where we take the longest time. Okay? All right. See you around. Thanks.